I'm reminded of a client, a psychologist in his 50s, who came actually to work on the issue of shame, because he felt really disempowered in his life by the shame. The shame prevented him from learning experiences, from personal relationships, professional relationships. The shame would shut him down and make it impossible to be fully himself. So, and I said, "Are you feeling the shame right now?" And he said, "Yeah, I can feel it as I'm talking to you." And I said, "Notice the shame as a young part of you." And, like many clients, he said, "Oh, yeah, I can remember. I felt shame all the time." And I said, "Okay, so right in this moment, notice the shame you feel as that little boy who lived with shame every day of his life." And my client said, "Oh, I can see him. He's around 6 or 7. He's in his room, face down on the bed, just filled with shame." And he said, because his mother he said, "My mother used to beat me and beat me and beat me, and then throw me in my room and say, 'You're such a disgusting child. I don't even want to see your face.'" The face she had just beat up, she didn't want to see. And he said the worst of it was being locked in my room and being told I was disgusting. And sometimes she didn't let me out for hours and hours and hours. And I said, "Okay, so notice that boy who is thinking, 'I am so disgusting, even my mother doesn't want to look at me.' And his door is closed. He's all alone. Can you let him know that you're there?" And my client, who I'll call Dan, and Dan said, "Okay, I'm knocking on the door and I'm asking him if I can come in." And he said, "But the little boy is saying, 'Go away.'" And he said to me, "What do I do now?" I said, "Well, keep letting him know that you're there." Right? Because that's what grown-ups do. They know that they're needed by the child, so they can't be discouraged when the child says, "Go away." And so he kept talking to this little boy, and the little boy kept saying, "Just go away." And he said, "I'm not going to go away. I'm going to stay here as long as it takes for you to let me, to open the door." And the little boy kept saying, "Go away." He said, "What do I do? He just keeps telling me to go away." And I said, "Hang in there. He has no reason to trust that you will be any different than your mother." And then he said, "Well, okay, I'm visualizing myself getting down on the floor and talking to him through the crack at the bottom of the door so he can hear me better. And he reassured the child, I'm not going to hurt you. I know, I understand what she's like. I know what she does to you. And I'm not going to hurt you. And then he noticed the door opening just a crack. And he saw two eyes. And he said, great, just peek at me so you can see who I am. I'm not like her. And then the little boy slammed the door again. And Dan kept talking to him and kept talking to him. And then the door opened again. And Dan kept talking to the little boy. And the door opened a little wider and a little wider. And then the child was there. And I said to him, just notice, as you see him, just notice your impulse. Do you want to reach out to him? Do you want to pick him up? And he said, I want to pick him up. He said, I want to pick him up, but it's too late. He already jumped into my arms. Right there is that fundamentally incompatible moment. So, and I said, just feel that little body in your arms. And Dan, tears began to roll down his face. And I always ask, are those your tears or his tears? Very, very important. And he said, both. And he just kept hugging this little boy and crying. And the little boy was holding on to him. And they just stayed in that disconfirming experience. The only touch that little boy had ever known was being beaten. And here he felt these safe, and Dan was a big guy, so he was a kind of bear of a man. So you could just imagine the little boy's feeling of being held safely.